Georgia Tech beat Clemson yesterday, 24-21, and some were shocked by this outcome. And I was shocked as well, but I was shocked that people were shocked. I will grant you, not everyone's watched Georgia Tech this year, and maybe you watched Clemson in week 1 against LSU, but maybe you didn't watch them closely, and maybe you didn't watch them against Troy. Georgia Tech's a better football team than Clemson. So it was just a blessing to us that FanDuel was giving us points with Georgia Tech, because I just picked them to win outright, emphatically on the show last week, to the point where some people wondered, like, what's your deal? Well, one team knew their identity. One team had the better quarterback. One team was the better team. And I'm describing Georgia Tech. So if you watched the game yesterday, I'm not sure how you argue with that. But I do understand, if you didn't watch this Ford-Chalai game, that you may think, but it's Clemson. But it's Georgia Tech. Yeah, that doesn't really mean anything. Now, if you're talking about a matchup from 2021 or 2 or 16, yeah, it probably does mean something. These are different teams. These are not your Meemaw's Clemson Tigers, and these are not your Meemaw's Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. That really could be the end of the preview. Bradley, what happened there? That's a little concerning. If you're listening on podcast, you're lucky. I mean, the purge started to happen on one of our monitors back here. So I really hope people get what happened yesterday. I was in the Tennessee press box watching the walk-off field goal, which just, I think theatrically, if you were to introduce someone to college football who has never watched before, let's say you got a girlfriend, you really think that your relationship could get taken to the next step if she loved college football. You're probably right. But you need to indoctrinate her somehow. Show her the last 30 seconds of the Clemson-Georgia Tech game. Because anyone who watches that and says, nah, that's not for me, is not for you. Now, I don't want to be giving out relationship advice, but I think that's just basic life advice. This was unbelievable. Everyone is gathered around me in the Neyland Stadium press box, and we're all watching this game. We're glued to it. And people are like, what is Brent Key doing? And Brent Key's over there like this. He's just standing there like he's planned it all. You know why? Because they planned it all. And so we don't need the timeout. We got 16, 17 seconds. We're fine. We'll spot the ball. We'll run them off. We'll run them on. We'll drain one from 50 plus, and we'll go home. After we wear a backwards hat in the press conference and trash the AP poll, the only thing Brent Key did wrong yesterday is he did not publicly acknowledge the commissioner's poll, which has long since had his team ranked, and the architect of which picked his team to win outright. We don't need the credit. We don't need it. We're fine here. But man, Georgia Tech yesterday wins the game 24-21. Now, again, you're going to have people who didn't watch the game and who are still married to logic from 10 years ago. So they think, oh, dude, Georgia Tech pulled a massive upset here, right? No, it's not a massive upset at all. It should happen. Again, I disagreed with the point spread. So there's that. And then people would probably think, oh, man, what kind of lucky breaks did Georgia Tech have to get to be in this thing? Hey, what if I told you Clemson needed lucky breaks to stay in the game? Kind of like in week 1. What if I told you Clemson needed some breaks for LSU not to house them in their own building? Because that's the reality of it. Clemson got lucky to still be in this thing. Now, luck, they had to execute on it. You know what I mean? Football luck is different than a scratch-off lottery ticket giving you $1,200 kind of luck. But there was a turnover on downs inside the 10 for Georgia Tech. They had to settle for a couple of field goals inside the Clemson 25. They botched a 4th down snap, which was horrendous execution. There was a 3rd and 22 late in the second quarter where Clemson's just given up the drive, and they convert, and then they end up going down there, and I think they scored on a 4th down later. All that stuff had to happen for Clemson to be in the game, guys. So I watched this through the lens of someone who did just that, watch the game. And I thought, better team's going to win this game. Frankly, it shouldn't have been that close. That's how I saw it. Optimistic Clemson friend hits me up after the game. This is a very optimistic Clemson fan. And he said, hey, there's still a long way to go in the season, which is true. But that's always said in a positive light. That's always said in a hopeful, optimistic sort of way. And it is true that there is a long way to go in the season. It's also true that while that could be good news for Clemson, it also could be bad news because you assume 1-2 is the worst it could get. 1-2 is not the worst it could get. That extra gear for Clemson's just not there. As a football team, I would argue as a program, that extra gear is not there. Now, you'll remember in spring and summer, I took a very measured approach on this because, hey, I could have just been wrong about it. So I chose to take the approach with Clemson that one of two things is going to happen here, and I have no clue which it's going to be. One is, yeah, there's a bunch of returning starters, but really they're just returning a bunch of guys who weren't really elite last year, and so you're just going to get more of the same. The difference is people are going to hype the same guys up a little bit more, and it's going to be a big disappointment, or they really are going to be one of the best teams in the country, and Dabo's going to have the ultimate I told you so dunk on the entirety of the college football public moment. Well, the latter is not going to happen. The former looks to be happening, and I don't really know what is going to come of this because this is a team that now needs to rewire its expectations. They're still alive, like mathematically. It's week 3, so no one's dead. I mean, you've still got one conference loss now. You could go to Charlotte and you could right the ship and get another shot at Tech or play Miami or play Florida State. Yeah, it could happen that way, but think about what we heard. Think about what maybe you just individually expected. Cade Klubnik's back this year with what I was told was going to be a really good offensive line, good receiver core. Now, I told myself that. I still kind of believe that. But this defense has got NFL guys all 3 levels, just everywhere. There were reasons for optimism, and I don't have that optimism. Hey, really quick timeout. We'll get right back to the video. Do me one favor. Make sure you're subscribed. It helps us keep the show free. It helps us keep the lights on. It helps us keep doing college football year-round, and we appreciate it. All right, back to the video. Clemson still has the 3rd best odds to win the league. Clemson and Florida State have the same odds to win the league. Let me tell you something about Clemson and Florida State. I'm saying those teams in the wrong order right now. I believe they play each other. I do believe that game happens, so I don't waste a lot of time on that. I was fine taking a wait-and-see approach on Clemson this year. Well, I have waited long enough, and I have seen enough. They're not a player in the national championship picture. As it turns out, they never were. So I feel a little foolish for spending the time that we did in the spring and summer on it. This is also, not to get 50,000 feet here because it's week 3 and we got a lot to talk about, but I mean, we've probably got our answer on Dabo. Just this era of Clemson football. There's no knock on him. Guy's legacy has been secured for a long time, but the experiment for Dabo at Clemson was we're really going to kind of not delve into the portal. We're going to do it our way. The Clemson way is a different way. I don't doubt that. I don't think he's disingenuous when he says that. I just think that the Clemson way in 2025 is not one that's going to really put you in the hunt for a national championship. He's not unfulfilled. He's got multiple championship rings. They owned the league for over a decade. So he's been there, he's done that. It's just this seasons change. What was that band? Expose? In the 80s, seasons change. Well, that's Clemson football right now. And it's this weird thing because Dabo can stay there kind of as long as he wants to, and it's not a crisis. They're going to win a lot of games this year. They'll always be a good, solid program as long as he's there. But I don't think there's really going to be fundamental change. There's a part of me that respects him for sticking to his principles and values. I've talked to you about this many times, but it's just tough for me when I know what Clemson has been, when I know what they could be if they just 20% course corrected. I watched Texas A&M last night with studs at receiver that they got out of the portal, and that being the difference in a game on the road at Notre Dame. And I think to myself, Clemson doesn't need 20 of those guys, but what difference would 2 or 3 or 5 guys over the course of a couple of portal cycles make at Clemson? And how little effort was actually put into exploring that? That's where I'd be if I were a Clemson fan. I do have good news for you, though. Since Georgia Tech won this game, we have our first padlock player of the year. You want to talk about a padlock stat? Haynes King is a padlock stat and an American icon. 20 of 28 for 211 in the passing game yesterday. But if you watched this, you know that the real stat line was 25 for 101. 25 what, Josh? Carries. Oh, Georgia Tech as a team ran the ball 25 times? No, friend. The quarterback, Haynes King, ran it 25 times for 101 yards and a touchdown. He was responsible. Just pop that paper thrice. He was responsible for 312 of their 358 total offensive yards. That's superhero stuff. That's what that is. They film a lot of movies in and around Atlanta. Haynes King, just play himself. That's superhero stuff. Brent Key and identity. He talked about it yesterday in the postgame, you know. He talked about toughness. There is not a coach out there going right now that doesn't talk about toughness. Everyone wants to be tough. Everyone preaches toughness. It's on everyone's wall. It's on the front of everyone's binder for their players to take home. But not everyone is. So how do you become tough? Well, you become tough by living it every day. You don't just say we're going to be tough this Saturday. You say we're going to be tough this Tuesday afternoon in April. You say we're going to be tough in every decision we make. Some of it has to do with football. Some of it has to do with how you carry yourself off the football field. It's just a way of life. I've always believed that there is a way that it can work at Georgia Tech. I've always believed it's insane that there's a program in Atlanta, Georgia, the capital of college football, the intersection of the SEC and the ACC, one of the most talent-rich areas in America. I've always thought it's insane that no one could find 25 kids per cycle to get into school there to win. Now Brent Key has. And he's done it in the most blue-collar way imaginable. They're just getting started there. They're just getting started. Now, here's what they need to be. He knows this, but I just want to caution the rest of America that was very late to the Georgia Tech party. So now they're going to try to make up for it by being the loudest person at the Georgia Tech party. They're not guaranteed anything here. And the reason I say that is because that Haynes King stat, 312 of 358, he can't do that every week. You can't have a quarterback do that stuff every week. And if the formula that they start to develop, if their identity offensively becomes so reliant on him carrying the ball 18, 20, 22, 25 times a game, well, then you're going to run into some random week where you're playing a much inferior opponent. You were favored by 18 and a half, even on the road, and it's just a slog fest in the fourth quarter. Why is that? Well, it's because when they sat around Monday of game prep, they said, dude, we can't run him like this week. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to have to win in a different way. And then you get to Saturday and you find out maybe you can't. That's the risk they run. And so that's why I'm trying to caution. It's one thing if he's just throwing it all over the place and the receiver room's full of animals and you've got no problem and you're razor sharp efficient. That's one thing. They're very reliant on him running the ball right now. Auburn, Jackson Arnold, I kind of feel the same way about him. There are a couple of guys out there actually right now. So beware the rat poison. It's very real, and now it's going to be heaped upon you at Georgia Tech, and I don't think they can play that style every week. So that's my concern. But that schedule is manageable. And there are going to be a lot of people talking this week about how there's such a clear path to Atlanta. There's not a clear path to Atlanta. The path is no clearer than it ever was before. You've gotten your way there maybe a quarter of the way. Now you're going to have to deal with expectations. So how competitively mature are you, and how diversified can you become offensively?